As you know, there were big protests in Victoria over the past couple of days. There plan to be even more. In fact, there's even a little sleepover protest happening right now at the front of Spring Street until there is a determination about that bill that gives Daniel Andrews way more power, passes, fails or is delayed in the Victorian Parliament. Brad Batten is the Shadow Police Minister and joins us now from Victoria. Brad, what smoke signals are we getting out of the conclave of the three MPs that will actually decide this, that being the Sex Party, or the Reason Party as they are now, who always vote for the government, the Greens, who always vote for the government, or the Animal Justice Party, who will always vote for the government?
So what we're hearing right now, Paul, is the only three people that have probably genuinely been consulted here in Victoria about this piece of legislation to hand a lot of power to Daniel Andrews to lock down people. Is there, I understand the state government is going to be putting 7 amendments, but those amendments just aren't enough. We've been talking about these restrictions at how they can discriminate against people, how they can lock people up without a pandemic here in this state. None of those things are going to be fully addressed by the amendments. That's a real concern. And those people that people can see on screen right now who are protesting, and I know, yes, a lot of media are trying to point them out as, you know, these radicals who are out in the street. I've gone for a walk around and spoken to some of the people in some of these protests who are mums and dads who have got businesses, and they're just concerned. They're concerned that a government who continuously interferes in their life will have more powers to lock down areas, lock down suburbs by postcode, lock down people because of characteristics. They're mums and dad businesses who want to just get to work and get on with what they do. And how many times, Paul, we've heard it too often. Every government wants to come out and go, small business is the backbone of our community. Well, if they're the backbone of our community, let's not bring in legislation that gives powers to a government to close down those very people that ensure our economy will keep running. And some of those people out there, they're concerned for their kids. We've had emails, and I'm Liberal. I can only imagine Labor Party are getting as many emails. And I say to the Labor Party in the upper house, it's time to stand, make a stand and stand for the people and not your party's position. There is hundreds of thousands of people who are contacting us over every week, and they want to have their say, be their voice, rather than just being the puppet of Daniel Andrews to give himself so much power in this state.
Well, see, I belled the cat on this issue before the last election, or sorry, just after the last election, which is the Victorian government changed the way that electoral system works and how political parties get funded, where essentially almost the entire amount of money that went to all political candidates in the 2016 election would go to just people running in the Victorian election. It means that they don't need donations from the private sector. It means they don't care what big business does, let alone what small business does, because they've basically got a system in place now where you, of course, you are funded by elections and people are fined for not voting in them, which means you get this cycle of them only ruling a constituency and never having to actually interact with any of the ones that they regulate. And that, in part, is part of what has fed into the arrogance of the world's longest lockdown and feeds into the arrogance of legislation to get ready for the next one, despite the fact that, of course, the story in Victoria should be coming out of that world's longest lockdown. Instead, the time when freedom is coming back to Victoria, with an obvious caveat of those that aren't able to play at the moment, this is what has dominated discussion. And while Andrews would like to pretend that it's just some sort of right-wing fever dream and an echo chamber amongst the right, I mean, you saw on the weekend, normal people were out there too. Now, I'm not going to defend the idiot with the gallows, but normal people were out there on the weekend, and the promise will be more will be there next weekend.
Yeah, and we join you, Paul. We don't defend people going out there with gallows. It's not appropriate. It's not right. And we don't even defend some of the signs that are out there. We've said that in the past. What we do defend, though, is people have, number one, a right to protest. So, and I encourage people, you've got that right. Do it peacefully. The police don't need any trouble there. They're just trying to do their job. But we need to make sure that the protests out there are peaceful. But people are scared, Paul. Like, they're contacting my office. They come in, they speak to you, and they have genuine fear. And the fear, you have to say it's justified. Daniel Andrews wouldn't have pushed this piece of legislation through the lower house in effectively a day if he was genuinely understanding of what was happening out in that community. The reality is he just doesn't care. He doesn't care about the protests out the front. And I can tell you there'll be backbenchers on the Labor Party on marginal seats who will have a whole different opinion, but they'll have more fear speaking up to Daniel Andrews than they will going out there and doing the right thing. Victorians need a voice from some of those backbenchers, and I encourage people to send the message to them as well. You can't just continue to be this arrogant and expect Victorians just to follow along when the rest of Australia is actually starting, particularly New South Wales, is seeing the freedoms open up. They're seeing making sure that less mask mandates, more people out in public transport, more people returning to work, and our state's bringing in legislation that can lock you down further. And a prime example is if you look overseas at the moment, they're currently looking in Europe at different countries of going into lockdowns, including some places where they're going to have lockdowns for those that are unvaxxed for the entire winter. We're going to have two-tier society, and that's not good enough.
Yeah, you expect them still to pay all of their taxes, right? I mean, there's some pretty dangerous logic behind that. That's what's happening in Austria right now. Now, I think one of the most red-hot stories I've seen in years is what Nick McKenzie reported in the Age newspaper over the weekend, that Victoria Police, they didn't just kind of want to have a chat. They wanted to arrest and charge up to 16 Labor MPs, but someone up in the brass said, no, don't do it because we'll offend the government. Now, if this stuff happened under Sir Joe, it'd be a royal commission. This is as red-hot as it gets, that the police doing the investigating thought that a crime had been committed, but someone above said don't do it because they would displease their potential political masters. You were a copper. What do you think of this story?
Paul, I can only say it is an absolute disgrace in this state that there's even a perception of political interference. What we're seeing now is people, particularly in the fraud investigators, coming out and saying they wanted to arrest and interview people. Now, arrest and interview is not charged. That's just the process to make sure that our system is abided by and done properly. We need to make sure that no person's above the law. And I heard Joel Fitzgibbons before on your show when he reluctantly eventually said that no person should be above the law. What we are saying is any minister, I don't care, Labor, Liberal, any colour at all, if they should be investigated, they must be investigated. We've seen investigations of members of parliament through Australia in history, but all of a sudden in Victoria, it's like we just can't touch them. And that comes down to the perception of political interference. Why are senior management doing it? I've said Shane Patton has a great opportunity. He's a newer Chief Commissioner. He wasn't there when this went through in the past. He needs to make sure this is reopened, and he needs an independent inquiry into every one of those ministers. And if they need to be questioned, they should be arrested and brought in exactly the same as I would have done when I was in the police force for someone who stole a Mars bar from the local milk bar.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, when you said it last week, I didn't quite sort of understand the oomph behind it. But after reading what I did on the weekend, you were right last week, and I was wrong to pull you up. Good on you, Brad. Nice to talk to you.
No, it's good to see you again, Paul.
All right, good stuff. Brad Batten is the Shadow Police Minister in Victoria. Again, I mean, just